Good afternoon. I just want to thank everybody for coming out this afternoon. It's beautiful Sunday afternoon, not morning, afternoon. But it's a nice day outside there today, but it's nice for you all to be coming here. We have a great privilege to have Pastor Chris Elliott to be able to join us here today to talk a little bit about his mission work and about some of the mission work that's going on in the Church of the Brethren. So before we get started, let's open up in a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you. We thank you for giving us this opportunity to be able to hear about your work that you are doing around the world. And we just thank you and praise you for men and women that you are equipping to be able to go around the world to spread your word. And just you tell us to go and spread your gospel. And we just thank you and praise you for this time that we get to gather here together. We just ask you to continue to be with us and open our eyes and open our hearts to your leading today. In your loving name, Jesus, amen.
Amen.
At this time, I'll hand it over to Chris, and thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Pastor. Yeah, I think maybe I would just make a comment here as I begin that, obviously my name is Chris Elliott. That's pretty plain to see. And I live in Fulton County, Pennsylvania. In Fort Littleton. I was the pastor of the Nobbsville Church of the Brethren for 35 years and retired in the year 2020. And it was in 2016 that I got involved with the Church of the Brethren in Central Africa. Through Marla Abbey and a couple other pastors, we started making some trips over there on an annual basis to do some pastoral training. We would do maybe a couple days here, a couple days there, that sort of thing. And it's sort of grown into something much bigger than that. But the idea of this inheritance of nations, and I'll have the next slide here, that God is bringing the nations, peoples of the world together to himself. And as we think of the languages, the tribes, all of the nationalities of people who are in the world today, there are so many. And there's over 7,000 languages recognized in the world today. But God is bringing them together. We would start in Genesis 11 when the nations were scattered and people had new languages. Now we see that the Lord is bringing them back together as an inheritance for his son, Jesus Christ. And in Revelation in particular, we can see how God brings that back together, even where he says in Revelation 22 that the leaves of the tree of life, are for the healing of the nations. And so the Church of the Brethren has been emerging there over the last number of years. And it started probably about 10 years ago or so, that traditional missionary activity is where we send missionaries like we did in 1923 to Nigeria, where Albert Helser and Stover Culp went, and they began the Church of the Brethren there and in Garkita. And they learned the language, they learned the culture, they start dressing like the people there and translating the Bible into their language. And ultimately they win some converts to Christ, and the people are baptized and a church begins. But this is the case where there were believers already there in these countries. We're talking about Central Africa, or East Central Africa, Congo and Burundi, Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. And in this Great Lakes region of Africa, there are churches and pockets of believers who are coming to us. And they're saying, we want to be Church of the Brethren. Well, they don't necessarily have a deep understanding of what that means to be brethren, but that's why we are there, helping them to see that and understand that. And one group in particular that's really fascinating is in Burundi. And how many of you have any idea of where Burundi is? It's just a small country. It's the size of Maryland. And if you take Rwanda and Burundi, two countries of about the same size, and put them together, they are half the size of Pennsylvania. So these are nationalities of people, countries with borders, but they're very small countries in the middle of Africa. And the group in Burundi started in 2015. And this almost sounds bizarre. But someone had given this pastor, his name is Expert Bukene. And they gave him a book, a Dunker's Guide to Brethren History. And when he got this book and he read it, and he says, "This is the church I want to start." So he opens a church in 2015 in Burundi. It's the Church of the Brethren. They're using the logo and all of that. And now they have 50 churches in less than 10 years. They're scattered around this little tiny country of Burundi. And we didn't even know that they existed until 2021. They had no U.S. brethren contact. They had no contact with brethren from any of the surrounding countries where there are at least a few brethren churches. And they began it just by reading this book, A Dunker's Guide to Brethren History. So I found out about them in 2021 for the first time, but by one of our pastors from Congo who was working there in that country, and he met them, and we got in contact, and I went there in 2022 to visit with them for the first time. We're just talking now, it's coming up on 3 years ago. And as I went there and was visiting among them and realizing some of the lack of understanding they have of the context of our history. And they got excited when they found out that the Church of the Brethren began in 1708. They said, this is an old church. See, in Burundi, they are a new church. And other people from around them will look at them and say, well, this is just some new upstart of a church. And it doesn't have any real significance because there's lots of new upstart churches. He says, we have a rich history. So they decided that in 2023, which would be 315 years after that first baptism in the Eder River in Germany in August of 1708, we're going to have a 315th anniversary celebration. So they had an evangelistic crusade, had 1,000 people there at every service it was in August of 2023. And so from Wednesday to Sunday, they would have these services going on. Bob Krause was there to preach for the event. And they had a parade the first day. They claimed it was 315 children, one for every year of the anniversaries. And so they had 315 children parading through the streets. And if we wait a second or two here into the video, you'll see the children coming. I didn't count the children, but I say there's a good chance it was 315. Now, I will admit that the salute kind of freaked me out a little bit, maybe a little too militaristic or something, but it was explained to me that they were honoring the heritage, the legacy that we have, and that was why they used the salute. They even wrote a song just for the occasion that they would sing at each of the events, and it was pretty exciting to be a part of that. And here's Bob as he was preaching there one night. Brethren World Mission gave them $5,000 to help pay for the expenses of the crusade. They had to rent the facility, they had to pay electric bill and rent a stage and that sort of thing. And when I got there and I saw this fabric with the Church of the Brethren logo on it, it was everywhere. There was just hundreds and hundreds of people wearing shirts and dresses and pants made out of this fabric, and I thought, they spent the whole $5,000 just on that fabric. And, well, they didn't. It turned out it was about $1,000. But they must have got a really good deal on it because it's everywhere around there. So anyway, that was a pretty exciting time, and Bob did a great job of preaching for the event. And that's my daughter there on the left, and I'll talk about her a little bit more later because she lives over there, and so she's my daughter, so I like to talk about her. She's the baby of our family. And she is with a pastor's wife from Kenya. They were able to send representatives from all of the other countries around there, the churches, and then I'm with two of the pastors from Congo. Every day in the morning, the crusade was in the afternoon and evening, and it would be like, the services would be like 3 to 5 hours long. But it's not 4:30 yet, Chris. He looked at his watch, so I just had to tease him about that. But every morning we had training sessions. They had one for men, one for women, one for small children, one for the youth, and one for the pastors. So this was where we were working with the pastors. And so the man standing next to me doing my translation is Pastor Expert Bukene. Well, they call him the bishop. And the guy started 50 churches. I think bishop's probably a pretty good title for him. And then at the end of each of the services in the evening, they would have an altar call. And we would have 100 or more people come forward at each of these meetings endings. They would come forward for salvation, for recommitments, for prayer, and so forth. But the Church of the Brethren has been in Africa, as I said, in Nigeria for just over 100 years now. But in Burundi, in Congo, in Rwanda and Uganda, this is much more recent, within the last 10 years or so. And Uganda is probably about 5 years old. And this was the case in Uganda where the pastor there, they have about 10 churches now, he found us on the internet. He was in a Pentecostal oneness church, which I'd never heard of before, but they don't believe in the Trinity. They just believe in somehow with God that I don't understand it. But anyway, they don't believe in the Trinity. But he was not convinced biblically that it was correct, and he's searching the internet trying to find something that fits in with where he thought he should be theologically, and he found the Church of the Brethren, and he said, this is it. And so he made, they just started this church, and they made some connections providentially. It certainly wasn't an accident. And so there's a great development that's been happening there in the last number of years. So Africa is very big. A lot of people think it is monolithic and it is all a jungle or it is all a desert, but it is very diverse. There are over 3,000 languages alone in Africa. So it's incredible diversity of people and culture, climate, and all of that. But where we are dealing with here is you see Congo there, that one is pretty prominent. And then just to the east of that, in that area, is where the Church of the Brethren has become very prominent in recent years. There are some new groups that are emerging there as well, similar kinds of connections, and to some extent this has come about through some missionary activity by the churches that are there. That Cameroon, that is mostly coming out of Nigeria because of the refugee situation there. Of Kenya, Malawi, and Tanzania, where the churches are now developing. And so this is where I pull in Psalm 2, 7, and 8, where the Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, your inheritance, and the ends of the earth your possession. So God the Father is speaking to Jesus the Son, the only begotten Son, and he's going to give him not the nation of Israel that was bound by ethnicity and geography, but an inheritance of nations that is without boundaries, that is so big and so broad and so vast, all of these languages and all of these cultures of peoples. So this is the Church of the Brethren, or one of the churches of the Brethren in Congo. This is one of their better buildings. Most of theirs aren't really that great, but this is the good one. This one meets under a tree. They have some benches that they sit on. but they're happily waving for us. This one meets under tarps. And I want you to check out the guitar. That's made out of an oil can. I have a brother who builds guitars and banjos and so forth, and he was pretty excited to see that. The Global Food Initiative of the Church of the Brethren is also very actively working there in this region. There's at least 2 pig projects that I'm aware of. This one's in Congo. There's another one in Rwanda. There's a couple of poultry projects. There's a poultry project now that is just emerging. There has been some like Farming God's Way, agriculture, conservation agriculture training. That some of that I've been involved with and some of that I haven't been, but it's all, connected with the conservation agriculture. I'm also a dairy farmer, by the way. I'm a retired dairy farmer. But if any of you ever here, were you raised on a dairy farm or you are a dairy farmer? Yeah. You're always a dairy farmer, aren't you? It's just there. I still milk cows in my dreams. and I wake up early. So anyway, this farming aspect is coming into play here as we do training with pastors there, and the reality that we are bivocational. And we're working with our families, we're working with our farms, we're working with our businesses, maybe we're teaching school, any number of things like that, along with our leadership roles that we have in the church. And so it's very important for the people to understand that the pastors are expected to work along with everybody else. They're not just the king that everybody brings things to in the church. But also for these people who are very impoverished, to teach them animal husbandry skills, not just the pastors, but the people in general in the churches, so that they can feed themselves better without expecting handouts to come in some way or another. This is one of the churches in Congo, again, and this is right on the border with Rwanda, and it's very close to where I stay when I'm in Rwanda. Excuse me. And you see in the back there is a mountain, and that is Mount Nyiragongo, and it is an active volcano. It erupted most recently in May of 2021. And so we live in the shadow of Mount Nyiragongo. And this church, I like to talk about the construction of it because there is no piece of lumber in it bigger than a 2x2. It's all rough cut 2x2s with roofing sheets for the siding and for the roof. And it's not really a dirt floor, it's a stone floor, like a lava flow is what it was built on. Fascinating. And they have a shared meal there on the left. It's pretty. They would be sort of like our old love feast where you have people sharing together out of the same bowl. I'm not sure how you do that here yet at Myerstown. I know at Knobsville, where I was a pastor, everybody got their own bowl for love feasts. But they will eat together like that and just share out of the same dish. The church there in Goma in Congo, the one we just saw the picture of, they, along with some other non-brethren churches in the area, have an association or an affiliation of churches, and they have an orphanage. And this is their new building, brand new building. It's like I say, it's constructed somewhat similarly to the church with the 2x2s. It looks like it was designed by a committee that they didn't like each other. But the children are happy. There's a lot of refugees in this area. There's 120 rebel groups that are roaming the forests and mountains of eastern Congo. And because of that, people have fled to the cities, or at least to the outskirts of the cities, and there's refugee camps popping up all over the place. And it's one of the largest refugee movements in the world at this time. We don't hear much about it here, but it's happening. And the Church of the Brethren is involved with this. Church World's, I'm going to say what's it called? Brethren Disaster Ministries, BDM. They are supporting some of the relief work there in these the refugee camps there. But that's where some of these children are orphaned because of that rebel activity and disease and general poverty. This is a picture from one of those refugee camps. The gentleman there with the jacket on the left is Pastor Ame, and he is Church of the Brethren pastor there in Goma. And along with him is Pastor Philemon, who is from another denomination, but he is just a dear brother in the Lord, working really hard there among these people. In the refugee camp, life goes on, and this lady had twins. And they insisted that it was a photo op for me. So I got to hold one of them, but as you can see, the little girl is not very happy with the white man that's holding her. And I don't know how well that shows up from where you're sitting, but she didn't say anything, but she sure gave me the looks. This is in Uganda, and like I say, the Church of the Brethren in Uganda just began about 5 years ago. Gordon Hoffert, who is a Brethren pastor in Minnesota, he made the providential connection here and has been developing a relationship with them. This church was built fairly recently, and my daughter and I were there a couple of years ago when they had just got done building it, but there was no roof on it yet. It just had a tarp on half of the roof. It had rained the night before, so the dirt floor had turned to mud. And when they have a worship service, they don't stand there and hold their hymnals. They're just dancing around, and so they were dancing in the mud, and it was quite a mess. So anyway, now I went there more recently, and they had cement floor, and they actually had a tile platform there where the worship team is standing there now. The Church of the Brethren in Tanzania began just about 3 years ago, and up until this past April, they had not had a baptism. So I was there, and they said, we're going to have a baptism, and like tomorrow, which was fine. But you find a lot of impromptu things, like you arrive at a wedding, and you find out you're going to be officiating over the wedding. That happens a lot in Africa. But they had a baptism in Lake Victoria, and they had not had one yet. So they wanted to do it when the Mzungu, the white man, was there, so that they knew how to do it. But this is the pastor there who started the church in Tanzania. He is baptizing his wife. And so that was pretty exciting to be a part of that. And this is the Church of the Brethren in Kenya. This began as a mission outreach of the church in Burundi. The one that started the 50 churches in just less than 10 years, they're now sending out missionaries to some of the other countries. And so in Kenya, there's 2 congregations now, and this is the second one that they started there. And you can see on the sign there on the side of the shack where they meet, it says Brethren's Church. And then underneath that it says Kanisa la Wandugu, which is Swahili, meaning Church of the Brethren. Kanisa is the word for church, and la Wandugu is of the brethren. And this is at the other church of the 2 they have in Kenya, and I really love this story. This lady's name is Dorcas. Her husband's name is Daniel. Not far from the church, a couple hundred yards, there is a chain link fence topped with wire, like razor wire, and it's a government facility of some sort. It looks like it's hundreds, if not thousands, of acres. It's just a lot of open space. But the church is close to that, here in this rather flat and swampy area. But one day, one of the church members saw something over on the fence, hanging by the fence, and went over, and here there was a bag with a baby in it. And this baby was in the placenta still. And it was raining. So they gathered up the baby, took it to the hospital, and the hospital said, well, the baby's fine, everything's okay, but there's no mother around, no father around. And so the police said, well, we don't really have anybody to give this to. And Dorcas said, we will take him. And they named him Gift, as a gift from God. And so this happened Well, it's approaching 2 years ago now when they found the baby. At the time that I took this picture, he was 11 months old. I've seen a lot of African children, and Grace and I talked about this, and she has seen a lot of African children that are 4, 5, 6 years old, and they're small. They're undersized, they're malnourished. The hair is discolored, extended bellies, all these kinds of things. And here is this guy, he's 11 months old, and he looks like he's ready to beat you up. It was just incredible to see this guy. And so they call him Gift, but they are really the gift to him. And it's just been a beautiful thing there, because these are very poor people. And so the church, which as a church they are also all very poor, they have committed to helping this couple as they have taken this child in. They already have 2 teenagers, but they're willing to take in this child and help him to get a good start. This is some of that lively worship I was saying about. This is the Church of the Brethren in Rwanda. You can see the stones on the floor. Most of them were wearing sandals or shoes of some sort, although some of them were in bare feet. And the gentleman there on the right is the pastor. And he's in his early to mid-60s, and it's just I love him. His name is Musanzaho Etienne, and he's just a dear man, and I like to call him the dancing deacon because of the energy that he has when he is in the church service, when he's preaching, he's singing, whatever. He just has a lot of action there. He's a great guy. One of the things we've also been able to do is to help some of the pastors with transportation. Cars are very expensive, and they're also expensive to maintain, of course, because they're having to buy fuel for them and repair parts, and the roads sometimes are pretty bad. But we are able to supply some motorcycles for them, and there's a couple different ministries that we've worked through to help this to happen. And so far, 4 motorcycles, 3 in Uganda and 1 in Burundi, that I've gotten some reports back on them too, of how many. They don't usually measure things in miles, it's usually in kilometers, and some of the maintenance costs that they've had, and how many church visits, home visits, how many salvations they've had as a result of this. And it's really gratifying to see how a little bit can go a long way at times to facilitate. Here's somebody who had to walk miles just to get to church, or maybe they were riding a bicycle, or maybe they're having to pay somebody to take them there, but now they're able to do that in a much more efficient way. It's been a great thing to watch. As a dairy farmer, I always get excited when I see cows, and you see lots of cows in Central Africa. And this is really interesting to me too, that the traditional African cattle, they got the humpback and they've got the big horns going out. And in Rwanda in particular, you see a lot of Holsteins and Jerseys, some occasional brown Swiss. And they have brought in frozen semen from Europe and from America. And so with crossbreeding, they've been able to improve their dairy herd there. You don't usually see big herds of cows. You'll often see them out along the road. Maybe there's an old man, like my age, or a child who is out there watching the cows so they don't get into the farming patches that are all around there. There is no tractors. There are no draft animals in Rwanda and Burundi. All of the work is done with hand tools for their farming. And you don't see very many fences in Burundi or Rwanda either. You get into Kenya and into Uganda, you start seeing more fencing. But in this area, you don't. You just have somebody watching the animals while they're out. And one morning I was out for a walk and I saw one of my neighbors milking his cow. And another day I was out for a walk and I saw this man wearing a white coat and he had white boots. And he was carrying a fishing tackle box. And I thought, he looks like a veterinarian. So I followed him around till he walked into a cow pasture. and he starts getting his, some vaccine out. So I'm nosy, for one thing, and two, I know a little bit of the local language, and he knew a little bit of English. So between the two of us, I was able to figure out what was going on, and he is the government veterinarian, and he is vaccinating the cattle for lumpy skin disease, which I thought it sounded like something that we'd made up when we were in Boy Scouts, but it's a real thing, and it causes abortions in cattle, loss of milk production, appetite, and unthriftiness, all of that. Doesn't usually cause death, but it makes the cattle pretty worthless. So that's what he was going around and doing. And this is how the milk is hauled, typically on bicycles in cans, and they don't have cooling on the farms. So they haul it to the milk co-op, and you see the sign here where in red it says Amata, and that is the Rwanda word for milk. So they bring it in on the bicycles there to the co-op, and then it's put into the tank to cool. They do process milk for fluid, and there's a lot of yogurt and cheese that's made and all of that. Great stuff. I love dairy products. I'm a dairy farmer. And it's been great to see that. And the cheese is kind of fascinating. Usually you buy it it weighs it's like a kilogram, which is 2.2 pounds. It's a little wheel. And it doesn't matter whose cheese you buy, they all taste the same. Apparently the culture of the cheese is such that it's always the same. So anyway, among the things that we've been able to do over the last couple of years, we started some nursery schools. There was one that started in Burundi, and that was in the fall of 2023. And the church there, the one that started the 50 churches in Burundi, in the capital city of Bujumbura, where they have the first church that they started, they've started a school. They have about 50 children. It's 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and 5-year-old. And it started out with just nursery school, and now this past fall they've added they call it P1, but would be the equivalent of first grade. So they're wanting to add more grades as they go. It's becoming somewhat financially challenging to allow this to grow, but they are determined to make that happen. And these are all girls, and I want you to see their hair, or I should say their lack of it. But this is kind of a cultural thing that usually they will shave or else cut very close the children's hair, boys and girls. If you have to carry water to bathe, that you don't have to carry as much water if you don't have to wash hair, for instance. And also with insects, lice and so forth, that's less of an issue if you can have short hair like that. Another picture here of the nursery school. They do like to paint letters and animals and other scenes on the walls there. That was the original one back, was the facility that they were using initially for the nursery school. Now that's the one they're converting into the primary school, and they also use a room there for teaching pastors. And this is the new building kind of across the street or the alley, whatever you want to say, there where they're using as a nursery school now. There's a picture of the children. Pastor expert, or the bishop, he has this car, and the Rwanda word, or the Burundi word is the same, is for an old man, is umusaza. And so this is umusaza imodoka. It's a very old car. and he and I joke about this, but it's like, we don't have any money for him to have a better car. And he drives, it's an old Mitsubishi. At one time in its life, it was 4-wheel drive. And it used to be able to climb hills, but it doesn't anymore. But what you do is every day you fill the oil, and then later in the day you might want to check the gas. It's a real smoker. But anyway, he does take it out every morning, and he's able to go out kind of in the flat area there around town, and he picks up children, and he brings them to the school. They don't have seatbelt laws. They don't have, some of the child restraint things that we would get into here. So they just all pile into the car like we used to when like old people like me were growing up, and you can see them hanging out the window, and they're just thrilled to pieces. So. In early 2021, Pastor Etienne from Rwanda, he and I were talking one day. I'm not sure we were on the phone or whether we were just communicating by text through WhatsApp. But he said they wanted to start a nursery school. And what he really wanted was for a young person, like a young American girl, to come and help them begin the school, like with teaching English and so forth, like a BVSer who would come and help. And so I said something to our daughter. See, Grace would have been 20 at the time. She turned 21 later that year. She was born in 2000, so this is early 21. Well, she was kind of interested in that, but it was COVID time, and we weren't able to travel, and so it wasn't until that fall that we're actually able to go and to make the visit there, so for her to really get the lay of the land. She had never been there before. Like, this is where Dad likes to go, but, I'd never been there. I never saw it. And from early in the year until later in the year, she wasn't quite as excited about this idea of living in Africa and teaching in a nursery school. But I'm going to make the trip with Dad because, one, he's paying for it, and two, it's probably going to be a lot of fun to do something like this, travel with Dad. So we went, and I had a hunch what might happen, and it did. It worked. She got there, and within 3 days, she didn't have to tell me. I could just see that she was hooked. And so we went back then, she and I, in January of 22, and we opened up the school. They called it at the time they called it the Brethren School, the Brethren Academy, I guess. Brethren Nursery School, that was the first name, right, Dolores? It was Brethren Nursery School. And they changed their name a couple of times as they've gone along. And so we began the school then, and she was basically on her own in going there. There was a little bit of support from Brethren Global Mission in Elgin, but we were pretty much paying for us to be there. So we were there for a couple of months, got the school up and running, and then she went back in September of 2022 as a full-fledged, supported Brethren Volunteer Service volunteer. And so she was there for 2 years, working in the now they call it the Grace Academy. And it's funny because they named it Grace, and her name is Grace, but it's Grace Academy Buhaza, which is the name of the village. Well, the acronym is GAB. And so Grace gets a big kick out of that because she's kind of gabby sometimes. So anyway, she's finished her 2 years there this past year, but she has gone back now on her own, and she is self-supported, so to speak. She's deputizing, gathering support, and for herself to be there. She does some volunteer work with the nursery school, but she also is working with a sewing ministry where they have treadle sewing machines, and they have like 60 women at a time who are going through this training program, learning how to sew. It's kind of an empowerment sort of thing for them to be able to support themselves and to support their families. And so she's administrating that. Because Dolores and I think it's kind of funny because Grace had no interest in sewing. Dolores loves to sew, but she didn't get into that. But she's not really into the sewing now, but she is helping to administer the program, and it's going very well. And she's also doing some youth work in the church there also. So the school began there in Rwanda in the old church building. It was built in 2017, so it wasn't very old, but they built it at the time with the money that they had. It really wasn't big enough. Some of the materials weren't that great, but they're able to use that now as the nursery school since they have built a newer, bigger, better church building. And through some money that we had raised through Southern Pennsylvania District, we were able to build some playground equipment. Local welder put that together, and the children love it. This is the classroom. The government is saying the ceilings aren't high enough, and the walls are made out of mud brick, and there's, we're running into some issues with the government there. And Rwanda right now, most of the churches in the country are shut down because the government has said so. It's very restrictive, very oppressive. Of our 5 churches, one of them is open, the one that's associated here with this school. And it's a long story. I don't want to get into all that here right now, but do pray for the churches in Rwanda as they work through this and learn how to live with this new reality where, this is my opinion, I think they need to go to more of a, I don't want to say underground church, but more of a house church mentality to work through this, at least for the time being. The blackboard is simply cement, and they paint it black. They kind of, they make sure there's no stones in it. They sift it, but they make it nice and smooth, and they just paint it with black paint. And so there's, of course, a few Grace pictures in here. There with her children. They really missed her when she wasn't there she was home for a couple months here over the fall recently, and I was there during that time, and they're like, "Where's Grace?" They missed her so much. All of the cement there is mixed with hand tools. They, using shovels, they do it on the ground. They, you take your stones, your cement, your sand, and you put some water with it, and you mix it all together, and then you put it in buckets and carry it on top of your head, or so they make the cement blocks on site. The blocks here you see in this next picture, they're all made right there. They do a lot that we're too lazy to do, I guess we would say. It takes a little longer, but they get it done. It's amazing the work that they get done. So this is the new school building that's going to be more up to the government standards that's being finished up at this time. As you can see, it's starting to take some shape. It's built so that the roof can be taken off of it and then a second floor built on top. That's kind of the long-term goal there. Oops. They had a graduation back in June, so that was Grace's first full-blown graduation service with them. They did a parade through the village there. Rwanda has a pretty good network of paved roads. All the back roads are horrific, but there's some main roads as you go here and there that are actually pretty good, and you can get around the country fairly well by using those paved roads. But at the end of the day, nursery school is exhausting. They always get a snack every day. They get a cup of porridge, and they get a mandazi. And a mandazi is sort of like a donut, but it doesn't have any sugar in it. It's just like a deep-fried bread type of thing. And it's like the premier breakfast, like we would say a coffee and a donut, right? And for them, it's porridge and mandazi, or maybe tea and mandazi, or coffee in some cases. I'm a coffee person, so. And the Great Lakes Bible School began in early 2023. Back when Grace and I were there, when we were starting the nursery school in 2022, I had some conversations with the gentleman there on the right in the picture. His name is Theoneste Sentabire, and he is a brother of Etienne, who started the church there in Rwanda. And Theoneste is finishing his doctorate in theology in Kenya. And we're both talking about how we just need some better, richer, fuller theological training for pastors. There's a lot of challenges that have come about because of the prosperity gospel and a lot of the mentality that the pastors have where they think that they're like the king of the church, that, we want to emphasize the servant leadership. And so he and I this has been kind of my dream for some time. So I was making these short-term visits that just seemed too short-term. And you couldn't really spend the time to dig deep into the scriptures and to dig deep into some real focused kind of training. But he and I are talking about this, and we're both almost crying as we realize that we have the same vision. So in early 2023, we opened the Great Lakes Bible School in Rwanda. We have about 15 students. You do see a white-haired man there, taller in the back, and that's Galen Hackman. He's been there to teach and to help with this. And he's been to the Bible school a time or two, but he's also been there before in some of the previous visits that we had there doing pastoral training. Just another picture of the guys there. And we're using rented facilities. We don't own any property. I don't know if we ever will, but we definitely are using the rented facilities as well as we can. It does create some challenges, but there's also some benefits and some flexibility that comes with that as well. Some of our guys there, we had a little classroom at that point that we were using, and so when it came time for testing, we thought, well, we really can't give them final exams in these tight quarters because they can just almost, lick each other's papers. So we took them outside in a kind of a breezeway that we had there, and we were able to spread them out a little better for the final exams. And one of the things that the students like the best is the food. And so we eat a lot of rice and beans. And sometimes we get tired of rice and beans, so we eat beans and rice. And there's a song that the Bittersweet Gospel Band that they have sung is called Beans and Rice and Jesus Christ. And so that's, as long as I got some beans, I got some rice, and I got Jesus, hey, what else do I need? So this is our cook, Matua. He's actually trained as a chef, and he really is a good cook and creative and uses spices well. And so, he's put the rice and the beans, and there's some cabbage on there and a few other things to give us some flavor. And those boys will eat those platefuls of food, and I look at that and I think, man, I could maybe eat half of that if I was hungry. And those young guys can really put it away. Yeah, this is Mayombe. He's our youngest student. He's still in his teens, and I don't know. These guys they'll eat 3 meals a day like that. And they'll pack it away. On the left is Caleb, and he is a pastor, a couple years younger than me, but he's close to retirement age, from Abuja, Nigeria. Church of the Brethren, EYN as it's called in Nigeria, pastor. And he has been to Rwanda, several times now, and has done some pastoral training. He wasn't there to officially teach in the Bible school, but he's very closely associated with that. It's a dear brother in the Lord. And along with him is Joshua, who is finishing up his doctorate, and he is also from Nigeria, from the EYN, and has been a teacher at Culp Theological Seminary in Nigeria. And so he had taught 2 semesters there with us for the Bible school. So we were happy to have him there with us as well. And that was one of my goals early on, was to get the Nigerian brethren, which have more of a rich history over the past 100 years, connected with these churches in Rwanda, Uganda, Congo, Burundi, etc. And that does seem to be happening little by little, and that's a great move there. We also want these men to learn practical skills. So from Amazon, I bought a pair of cordless clippers. You can charge them with a cell phone charger, and everybody has a cell phone charger because everybody has a cell phone, even over there. And so they're learning how to cut hair. We want our pastors to be bivocational. We want them to have practical skills. And so this is Jonas. He's one of my favorite students. I try to be careful about the favorites thing. But Jonas is, in my opinion, the classic brethren farmer preacher. He's got these big hands, and he's a farmer, and he's got a family, and just a really great country guy. But he's there working with the chickens, learning some animal husbandry skills along with the other students. And the students are learning how to mix feed, which is not too technical. But we buy the corn, the ground corn. We buy the soy and the minerals and so forth, and we have to mix it ourselves. And we don't have a grinder mixer or anything like that. So you just put it on a pile on the ground, and everybody gets in there and starts digging through it and mixing it up. There was a widow in the community that the students had identified as being very needy. Her husband had died a number of years ago when he was working out of the country in Uganda and was never able to come home. He died there. He was there working, trying to support his family. He had a wife with 2 daughters, and now these 2 daughters, and they don't have no father anymore. And she had a very poorly built house. It's just sticks woven together, and you could see through it. So the students one day did it as like kind of a community service project. It was part of one of their classes, actually, of the church's role in the community. And they mixed mud and chinked her house all over. You take off your shoes and you stamp around in the mud to mix it, and then they, with their hands, spread it out over there. And this lady who never smiled, according to the neighbors, that day, she was very happy. It was, for her, it was a new day. Our night watchman. We keep him in the box during the day, but we let him out. He runs around the compound at night, and he warns us if anybody's around. Probably not as dangerous as he might look, but hopefully he'll scare the intruders away. Now, the International Pastoral Institute was opened in 2016, but remember, nobody in the, or maybe, did I tell you this? Nobody in the U.S. knew about the Church of the Brethren in Burundi until 2021. So we didn't even know they had a pastoral training program. But they have this International Pastoral Institute, and so we are also working along with them, helping them to develop a better and stronger program there. And some of the students there in Burundi. This is my family. And they like to sing as well. Now, believe it or not, they are singing in English, but they are singing in their broken English, singing about, this is my family. This is a church song that they sing at the end of the service every Sunday. This is my family. My family in Jesus. And it's another picture of Grace with the pastor's wife from Congo, and then Grace teaching in the Burundi Brethren School. And this picture was just taken a couple of weeks ago. Grace sent it to us. She was over in Congo visiting with some churches there, and she was in the refugee camp. And as she emerged from the refugee camp with these other people, she saw these sunflowers. And here in the midst of all of this bleak darkness of a refugee camp and all of the misery of these people, here is these bright sunflowers bringing some brightness, some joy into, at least to our eyes for a moment or two. And so she wanted to get a picture there among the sunflowers. And this is the Church of the Brethren in in Rwanda. And I share this picture because this is the one church that is open out of their 5 churches, that were closed. This is the one that is actually able to meet. So pray for the Church of the Brethren, Rwanda, as they work through these issues there with the government. This is the Church of the Brethren in Kenya. Pastor Richard, he is the missionary who went from Burundi to Kenya to start the church there. Very, I guess I should say, impoverished family. They live on very, very little. I was in the apartment where they live. They just have, a tiny space there where the boys sleep on the living room floor, and mom and dad and the baby girl sleep in the bedroom, and it's very, very simple living, to say the least. And the Church of the Brethren in Burundi, many of the buildings are pretty substandard. This one's just made out of mud brick, and they need to be replaced, but it is what it is, and they have what they have, and they use what they have. This is a church in Congo. They do have a decent building. It's not finished, but through the support from the southeastern district, they were able to buy the land and to put up a cement block building. And in Tanzania, as I mentioned, there is Pastor Robinson, who there we had the baptism back in April. They have 6 churches now. They began just 3 years ago with 1 church, and now they have 6 in a couple of scattered places around the country. And you see the rocks there in the city of Mwanza. The word Mwanza means rocks, and there's lots of rocks there. Beautiful place. And Uganda, this is Pastor Sedrak, the one that found us on the internet. Him and his wife and their most recent addition to their family. They have 2 girls now. And I do need to mention that there are some basic financial needs that we have, and God is providing this. And as I promised these pastors, here's what we want to do to help you. Working through Brethren Global Mission in Elgin, working through Southern Pennsylvania District, working through Brethren World Mission, and the fundraising that I've been able to do on my own, that I said, we're not promising you that this will come, but as God provides, this is what we want to give you. So we're looking at about $4,000 a month for the Great Lakes Bible School, and $1,000 each for the 2 different nursery schools, but also to give some support to the International Pastoral Institute. And this is just a pretty new development on our part to be supporting them at $1,000 a month. So those are the needs that I would share with you as I bring it to a close here now. And your prayers and your support are much appreciated. The Church of the Brethren as a whole, I have found so many people that are excited about what's happening. And it's sort of like it's like a pent-up energy that we haven't done a lot of international missionary work in recent years. But God is doing some really great things in this part of the world, in Central Africa. And even though we lament and maybe even shed some tears as we think of the Church of the Brethren as it is today, it's not what it was 20 years ago or 50 years ago or however old you might be. And remember, the glory days of the 60s when everybody had big families and we were filling their churches. But the Church of the Brethren is actually growing and increasing. Maybe not here in the U.S., but globally speaking, God is doing a great work. And I just want to encourage you to be excited about that and to embrace that and to pray about that and support it in whatever ways that you can. So thank you very much. Like I say, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today, and I'll be hanging around here for however long Walter and Peggy let us hang around here. If you have any questions, or if you need to ask me anything. Okay, Pastor.
Thank you, Pastor Chris, for that wonderful presentation that you have given us. And it's neat to see what the Church of the Brethren is doing around the world. And the part that I found the most interesting part is we didn't even know it was happening.
Yeah.
That is amazing how God works. God is working even when we're not even realizing that he is working. And I think that's encouraging to us, and that we need to continue to be in prayer for these other churches all around the world. I know I think about that on a Sunday morning, and we are so blessed to be able to come here on a Sunday morning and be able to openly be able to praise God. But there's so many churches around here that are grateful that they are able to praise God, and they're not in a heated or cooled facility, and the chairs aren't near as comfortable. So it's just great to see, and so thank you for what you shared with us here. There are offering plates in the back if you feel led for a love offering that will be going towards the different things that were being spoken about tonight. And at this time, I want to close in a word of prayer. But before that, if anybody has any questions, I'm sure Chris Elliott would be more than welcome to answer, like he said, afterwards in the back there, if you have any other questions or anything. But let's bow our heads in a word of prayer at this time. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you We thank you for brave men and women that are around this world that are out spreading your gospel. We just ask you for all the churches in Africa, specifically right now, that are being able to be touched by your word and by your gospel and your good news. So we just thank you for that. May you just put a hedge of protection over each one of those pastors and people in those churches. We ask you for those churches' doors to be reopened. But we also know that you are working. Even when we don't see it, you are at work, and you are a mighty and gracious God. And God, we just ask you for all their needs to be provided. For you tell us that you care and you will take care of our needs. So we just ask you right now, we lift them up to you right now in the name of Jesus Christ, that we just thank you and praise you for all of your many blessings. May you continue to encourage us, just as your great commission, it tells us to go spread your gospel, that we are not ashamed of your word, that we are not ashamed of what you have done, dying for us, Jesus. And we just thank you and praise you today. May your word not go out of void like you tell us, that we just thank you and praise you for all that you have done. In your loving son's name, amen. So thank you very much for everybody that attended today, and thank you